Admiral Hyunwoo Park stood on the bridge of his command ship, staring at the blue-green world below. Terra Nova had been humanity's greatest success. The planet fed millions across 3 solar systems. Now he watched it for the last time. The message from the Galactic Consortium still glowed on his screen. 72 hours to evacuate all humans from Terra Nova. After that, the aliens would use force. They called it pacification. Hyunwoo called it murder. "Sir, the transport ships are ready," said Captain Ji-hoon Lee. His voice was steady, but Hyunwoo could see the anger in his eyes. Ji-hoon had grown up on Terra Nova. This was his home. Down on the planet, Dr. Yoonji Kim walked through her research gardens one last time. She had spent 15 years creating new crops here. Plants that could grow in harsh soil. Vegetables that packed more nutrition than anything found on Earth. Food that could end hunger across the galaxy. Now she had to leave it all behind. "The aliens won't even let us take seeds," said her assistant, a young man named Tae Hyun Yoon. He was an engineer, not a farmer, but he understood what they were losing. "They say human crops are too dangerous." Yoonji laughed bitterly. "Too dangerous? They feed people. But the consortium thinks feeding people is a threat to their control." In Tao, the capital city, So Young Choi finished packing the last of the diplomatic files. As the human representative to the consortium, she had tried everything. Negotiations, bribes, appeals to justice. Nothing worked. The Veltari commander, a tall alien with gray skin and cold black eyes, had been clear. "Humans expand too fast. You take too much, you ask too many questions. The galaxy will be more peaceful without you." "We've done nothing wrong," So Young had argued. "You exist," the commander replied. "That is enough." Now she watched human families boarding transport ships. Children cried as they left their toys behind. Parents carried what they could. Everyone looked lost. The Veltari ships hung in orbit like metal vultures. Their commander, Thekvor, watched the human evacuation with satisfaction. These creatures had spread across dozens of worlds in just 2 centuries. They built cities, farms, and factories wherever they went. They traded with anyone willing to deal with them. Worst of all, they inspired other species to want the same freedoms. The consortium had spent thousands of years keeping order in the galaxy. Order meant everyone knowing their place. Humans refused to learn their place. "Sir," his aide reported, "the refugee fleet is almost loaded. 50,000 humans on Terra Nova, all being moved to transport ships." "Good," Thekvor said. "Once they leave, we can properly manage this world. The Nexari have already chosen which crops to keep and which to destroy." He didn't mention that the Nexari planned to claim credit for the human crops. In a few years, the galaxy would forget that humans had created this abundance. History would say the crystal beings of Nexar had always been the galaxy's greatest farmers. But not everyone was leaving Terra Nova. In a hidden bunker beneath the northern mountains, Minho Kang checked his equipment one more time. Military intelligence had trained him for missions like this. Stay behind enemy lines. Watch. Record. Report when possible. His bunker had enough supplies for 2 years. Solar panels disguised as rocks would provide power. Underground springs gave him water. Automated cameras throughout the planet would record everything the aliens did. The consortium thought all humans were leaving. They were wrong. Final transport departing in 1 hour. Ji-hoon announced over the communication system. All civilians to the ships immediately. Families hurried through the loading bays. Farmers carried soil samples in their pockets, the only pieces of their home they could take. Scientists uploaded research data to personal devices. Children clutched drawings of the only world they had ever known. Hyunwoo watched it all from his bridge. Every transport that left took a piece of his heart with it. These people had built something beautiful here. They had turned an empty world into a garden. Now aliens who contributed nothing to the galaxy were taking it away. "Admiral," a young officer said quietly, "some of the civilians are asking where we're going." Hyunwoo sighed. "Tell them we'll find somewhere safe. Tell them this isn't the end. But he didn't know if that was true. The consortium controlled most of the galaxy. They had just declared humans unwelcome in civilized space. Where could 50,000 refugees go? Yunji took one last look at her laboratory. Years of research sat on these shelves. Solutions to drought, famine, and soil poisoning. The aliens would probably destroy it all. They seemed to prefer keeping other species dependent rather than helping them thrive. She picked up a small device from her desk. It looked like a simple data pad, but Taehyun had built something special into it. If she ever returned to Terra Nova, this device would activate systems hidden throughout the planet. Insurance in case the aliens thought they had won. Ready? Doctor? Taehyun asked. No, she said. But ready or not, we have to go. The last transport lifted off as Terra Nova's sun touched the horizon. Jihoon watched his homeworld shrink in the viewport. Somewhere down there, Minho was probably watching the ship leave. The intelligence officer would be alone on an entire planet surrounded by enemies. Set course for the outer rim, Yunwoo ordered. We'll figure out our next move when we're clear of consortium space. As the human fleet jumped to light speed, Thekfor smiled. The troublesome humans were gone. The galaxy would be peaceful again. The consortium's rule would continue for another 1,000 years. He was wrong about everything. In his bunker, Minho activated the planet-wide sensor network. Every move the aliens made would be recorded. Every word they spoke would be translated and filed. Every weakness they showed would be noted. The humans were leaving, but they were not giving up. They were learning to be patient, learning to watch, learning to wait. And someday, when the time was right, they would return. Thekfor thought he had eliminated a threat. Instead, he had created something far more dangerous than an expanding human empire. He had created human determination for justice. The last transport disappeared into the stars, carrying 50,000 refugees to an uncertain future. Behind them, Terra Nova's sun set on the most beautiful world humanity had ever made. It would not be the last sunset they would see there. 3 years had passed since the humans left Terra Nova. Captain Sujin Nam walked through the corridors of the New Sol, one of dozens of refugee ships scattered across the galaxy's edge. The ship had been a luxury liner once. Now it housed 3,000 displaced people in spaces meant for 300. Captain, called engineer Taehyun Yoon from behind a control panel. The water recyclers are acting up again. I can fix them, but we need new filters soon. Sujin nodded. Everything on the ship needed repair or replacement. They had been running on salvaged parts and hope for too long. How long can you make the current filters last? Maybe 2 weeks, Taehyun said. He didn't mention that he had been performing miracles to keep them running this long. His modifications to the ship's systems had pushed everything beyond normal limits. In her small office, intelligence analyst Yerin Oh studied reports from across the galaxy. What she had discovered made her angry. The consortium wasn't just erasing humans from the worlds they had taken. They were erasing humans from history itself. Look at this, she told her assistant, showing him a data file. This is a consortium report about agricultural advances on Terra Nova. It says the Nexari developed all the new crops. No mention of Dr. Kim or any human scientists. The assistant shook his head. They're stealing our achievements. Not just ours, Yerin said. I've been digging into older records. 12 other species were relocated by the consortium over the past 1,000 years. All of them had made major advances in science or technology. All of them disappeared completely. She pulled up more files. The Kethri developed faster-than-light communication. The Vornak created new energy sources. The Moralians built the first gravity manipulators. All gone. And all their inventions are now credited to consortium species. The pattern was clear. The consortium didn't just remove threats to their power. They stole everything valuable and rewrote history to hide their crimes. On another ship in the refugee fleet, Admiral Dongjun Shin met with captains from a dozen vessels. They spoke in old Korean military codes, languages the aliens had never bothered to learn. To any listener, it sounded like casual conversation about farming or family. The harvest in Sector 7 looks promising, said Captain Ginny Song, commander of the Busan. In code, she was reporting that her ship had successfully infiltrated consortium shipping lanes. "My grandmother's recipes are working well," replied Captain Boram Kwan from the Jeju. Her ship had been testing new stealth technology that Taehyun had designed. Dongjun smiled. The aliens thought the humans were broken, scattered, and defeated. They were wrong. The refugee fleet was more organized than it had ever been. They were just very good at hiding it. "How many of our children have found good schools?" he asked. This was code for asking how many human ships had successfully placed observers in consortium space. 47 are doing well in their studies, Ginny replied. They're learning everything they can. 47 human ships were now operating deep in consortium territory. They looked like merchant vessels, research ships, or independent traders. The aliens saw them as harmless refugees trying to rebuild their lives. They had no idea they were looking at an intelligence network. Dr. Haewon Jang worked alone on a dead world at the galaxy's edge. Officially, she was studying ancient ruins as a hobby. In reality, she was uncovering the consortium's darkest secrets. The ruins belonged to the Althari, one of the 12 disappeared species. Their records were carved in stone, harder to erase than digital files. What Haewon found there changed everything. The Althari hadn't disappeared. They had been systematically hunted down after being relocated to preserve galactic peace. The consortium had used the same lies about them being too aggressive and disruptive, but the Althari had hidden something before they died. Deep. In their ruins, Haewon found a chamber filled with evidence, star charts showing the locations of other extinct species, records of consortium war crimes, proof that the Galactic Consortium was built on genocide. She transmitted her findings using an old human archaeological code. Within days, the information reached every human ship in the galaxy. The refugees finally understood what they were really facing. On the edge of consortium space, Veltari patrol ship Dominance drifted silently through the void. Commander Velkas had been ordered to investigate reports of unusual activity in the sector. Pirates, probably, or smugglers. The ship's crew of 24 had been preparing for a routine patrol. They never saw the human ship that appeared behind them. They never felt the boarding party that slipped through their hull. They never heard the quiet footsteps in their corridors. When another consortium ship found the Dominance 3 days later, it was empty. The crew was gone. No signs of struggle, no damage to the ship, just empty corridors and cold silence. The disappearance was reported as a pirate attack. The consortium sent stronger patrols to protect their borders. They never suspected that their missing crew was being held on a human refugee ship, being questioned about consortium military procedures. Captain Woojin Bei watched the interrogation through a one-way window. The Veltari officers were cooperating fully. They had been told their crew would be returned safely if they provided information. Most believed it. What they didn't know was that Woojin's ship, the Incheon, was unlike any vessel in the galaxy. Taehyun had spent 3 years modifying human ships, but the Incheon was his masterpiece. It could phase partially out of normal space, becoming invisible to most sensors. How many ships like this can patrol this sector? The interrogator asked a Veltari lieutenant. Usually 6, the alien replied. But after the pirate attacks, they've increased it to 12. Woojin smiled. The aliens still thought they were dealing with pirates. They had no idea that humanity was methodically mapping their entire military structure. Back on Terra Nova, Min-Ho Kang crouched in the ruins of what had once been Dr. Kim's laboratory. The Veltari had destroyed most of the research, but they had kept some of the crops. They were trying to reverse engineer human agricultural science. They were failing. Min-Ho's hidden cameras showed Veltari scientists struggling with plants that simply wouldn't grow properly. The aliens didn't understand the complex relationships between the different crops. They thought they could just plant the seeds and harvest the results. But Dr. Kim had built her agricultural systems like puzzles. Each piece needed the others to function. Remove human knowledge from the equation, and the whole system collapsed. The Veltari were getting desperate. Their colonists were facing food shortages. The planet that was supposed to feed their expansion was barely feeding itself. Minho activated a hidden transmitter and sent his report to the refugee fleet. The aliens were vulnerable on Terra Nova. When the time came for humans to return, they would find enemies who were hungry, frustrated, and unprepared. On the new Sol, Captain Su Jin received a coded message from Admiral Shin. She read it twice, then smiled for the first time in months. The message was simple. The children are ready for advanced lessons. It meant the human intelligence network was complete. They had eyes and ears throughout consortium space. They knew where every important military base was located. They had infiltrated alien communication networks. They had identified which species might be willing to rebel against consortium rule. Most importantly, they had learned to be patient. For 3 years, humanity had appeared weak and scattered. They had played the role of defeated refugees perfectly. Now it was time to teach the galaxy what defeated humans were really capable of. Sujin walked to the bridge and looked out at the stars. Somewhere in that vast darkness, other human ships were preparing for what came next. The consortium thought they had eliminated humanity as a threat. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Commander Boram Kwan watched the consortium supply convoy from her hidden position behind a dead moon. 6 cargo ships carrying weapons and equipment to Veltari military bases. Perfect targets for what the aliens still believed were pirate attacks. Her ship, the Jeju, had been modified with Taihyun's new phase technology. To normal sensors, they were invisible. To the naked eye, they looked like empty space with a slight shimmer. "All teams ready," reported her tactical officer. "We can take all 6 ships without them sending a distress signal." "Remember the rules," Boram said. "No casualties unless they resist. We're not murderers like them." The Jeju phased back into normal space directly beside the lead cargo ship. Boarding pods attached to the hull before the aliens even knew they were under attack. Within minutes, human teams had secured all 6 vessels. The Veltari crew surrendered without fighting. Most were just merchant sailors, not soldiers. They were transferred to life pods and pointed toward the nearest consortium world. Their ships and cargo disappeared into human hands. "Another successful pirate attack," Boram announced to her crew. They all smiled. Let the consortium keep thinking they were dealing with random criminals. It made their job much easier. In his workshop, aboard the new Sol, Tae-hyun Yoon put the finishing touches on his greatest creation. The prototype ship looked small and harmless. It was neither. "The phase drive is stable," he reported to Captain Sujin. "The ship can stay invisible for up to 6 hours. After that, it needs 12 hours to recharge." Sujin studied the control systems. Everything was designed for maximum stealth. No energy signatures, no heat emissions. The ship could appear and disappear like a ghost. "How many can you build?" she asked. "With the materials we've captured? Maybe 30 in the next 6 months, but each one will be invisible to everything the consortium has." Tae-hyun didn't mention his other projects. Hidden throughout the human refugee fleet, he had been building much more than stealth ships. He had weapons that could disable alien technology without harming the crews, devices that could hack consortium communication networks, tools that would let humanity fight a war unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Dr. Yun Seo Park worked in a biological research lab that officially didn't exist. Her ship, disguised as a medical vessel, drifted through neutral space while she perfected her most important work. The samples from Terra Nova had taken years to modify properly. Dr. Kim's agricultural research had given Yun Seo the foundation she needed. Now she had something that would target Veltari biology specifically. It wasn't a weapon exactly. The modified organisms would make Veltari violently sick, but wouldn't kill them. More importantly, they only affected Veltari. Humans, Nexari, and the dozens of other species in the galaxy would be completely immune. "The field tests are complete," she reported to Admiral Shin through encrypted channels. "Delivery system is ready. We can deploy it whenever you give the order." The Admiral's response was quick. "Not yet. Save it for when we really need it." Admiral Hyunwoo Park stood in the command center of a ship that officially didn't exist. The Soul was hidden in an asteroid field at the galaxy's edge, invisible to any scanners. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of every human ship in the galaxy. 50,000 refugees had become something much more dangerous. They were now a distributed military force with better intelligence than any government in the galaxy. They knew where every consortium weakness was located. "Sir," reported Intelligence Chief Yerino, "we've confirmed the locations of all 12 extinction sites. The species the consortium relocated were taken to dead systems and eliminated." "How long ago was the most recent?" Hyunwoo asked. 80 years. The Threnody. They had developed new medical technology that could extend life by centuries, very threatening to consortium control. Hyunwoo nodded grimly. 80 years meant there might still be survivors, hidden bases, resistance groups, potential allies, who thought they were the only ones fighting back. "Send reconnaissance teams to all 12 sites," he ordered. "If anyone is still alive out there, we need to find them." On Terra Nova, Min Ho Kang smiled as he watched Veltari colonists stumbling through Dr. Kim's ruined gardens. They were trying to grow food, but nothing worked properly. The aliens had no understanding of the complex systems that made human agriculture so successful. "The soil nutrients are wrong," one Veltari scientist complained to another. "These plants need specific bacterial relationships that we don't understand. Perhaps we should ask for help from the Nexari," suggested his colleague. "The Nexari claim they invented these crops," the first scientist replied. "But their experts can't make them work either." Minho activated another of his hidden systems. Microscopic machines released into the soil would make the growing problems worse. The Veltari would face famine on a world that should have been paradise. Deep in consortium space, Captain Jin Song met with representatives of 6 different species on a neutral trading station. Officially, she was selling medical supplies. Actually, she was doing something much more important. "The humans remember us," whispered an elderly Kithri trader. "We thought everyone had forgotten our people existed." "The consortium wants you to think that," Jin-A replied quietly. "They want every species to believe they're alone. But you're not alone anymore." She handed the trader a data chip. "These are the real historical records. Proof of what the consortium has done. Share them carefully." Similar meetings were happening throughout the galaxy. Human agents were making contact with oppressed species, sharing evidence of consortium crimes, and offering something that hadn't existed for 1,000 years. Hope. Senator Q-Sung Lim had once been one of the most powerful politicians in human space. Now he sat in a cramped recording studio aboard a refugee ship, preparing to address the galaxy. "Are you ready?" asked the technician. Q-Sung straightened his simple clothes. He looked like a refugee, which was exactly what he wanted. "Begin transmission." The signal went out on every frequency humans could access. It bypassed consortium sensors using codes that Taihyun had embedded in their own communication systems. For the first time in 3 years, a human voice spoke directly to the galaxy. "People of the galaxy," Q-Sung began, "you were told that humans were relocated for the good of galactic peace. You were told we were too aggressive, too dangerous to live among civilized species. These were lies." He paused, letting that sink in. "We were removed because we asked questions. We developed technologies that threatened consortium control. We inspired other species to want freedom. For these crimes, we were exiled." The transmission showed images from Dr. Zhang's archaeological discoveries, proof of the 12 extinct species, evidence of systematic genocide. "The consortium told you we were gone?" Q-Sung continued. "We are not gone. We are watching. We are learning. We are remembering every crime, every lie, every species that has suffered under their rule." He leaned forward, his voice becoming steel. "You wanted us to leave. We did. Now count the cost." The transmission ended, but its effects rippled across the galaxy. On 1,000 worlds, oppressed species looked up at the stars and wondered if freedom was possible. In consortium council chambers, alien leaders demanded to know how humans had accessed their communication networks. Commander Thekfor stood in his command center on Terra Nova, reading reports that made no sense. Supply convoys were disappearing. Communication networks were being compromised. Pirates seemed to know exactly when and where to strike for maximum damage. "Sir," his aide reported nervously, "the High Command wants to know why this sector has lost 12 supply ships in the past month." "Pirates," Thekfor said automatically. But he was beginning to doubt his own words. These weren't random attacks. They were too precise, too well-informed. "There's something else," the aide continued. "The human transmission yesterday. How did they break into our secure networks?" Thekfor had no answer. The transmission had appeared on every screen in consortium space simultaneously. It should have been impossible. "Double the patrols," he ordered, "and bring me everything we know about human technology." What he found in the files worried him. Human innovation had always been impressive, but 3 years in exile might have pushed them to develop capabilities the consortium had never imagined. For the first time since the humans had left, Thekfor felt a cold touch of fear. In the depths of space, Admiral Dongjun Shin received reports from across the galaxy. Every human cell was in position. Every target had been identified, every ally had been contacted. The galaxy thought humanity was scattered and broken. They were about to learn the truth. Humans weren't scattered. They were positioned. They weren't broken. They were ready. The shadows had been moving for 3 years. Now it was time to step into the light. Admiral Dongjun Shin stood before a holographic map showing the entire galaxy. Red dots marked consortium military bases. Blue dots showed human positions. There were far more blue dots than the aliens could ever imagine. 3 years of preparation, he said to the assembled human commanders. Today we show them what humanity really is. Captain Ji-Hoon Lee commanded the strike force moving toward the Veltari military shipyard at Karo Station. His ship, the Daegu, was one of Taihyun's new stealth vessels. Beside him flew 29 identical ships, all invisible to enemy sensors. "Remember," Ji-Hoon told his pilots, "we're not here to destroy. We're here to paralyze. Hit the power systems, the communications, the weapons. Leave the life support alone." The shipyard was massive, capable of building 100 warships at once. It was also completely undefended. Why would the consortium guard against an enemy they thought was scattered and powerless? The human ships phased into normal space inside the shipyard's defensive perimeter. Taihyun's new weapons fired silent beams that overloaded alien electronics, without harming the crews. Within minutes, the entire facility was dark and helpless. "Station secured," Ji-Hoon reported. "No casualties on either side." Similar reports came in from across the galaxy. 12 major military installations had gone dark simultaneously. The consortium's military network was crippled, but not a single alien had been killed. On Terra Nova, Dr. Yoon-ji Kim walked through her old research gardens for the first time in 3 years. The Veltari had ruined most of her work, but Minho had kept some systems running in secret. "The underground irrigation network is still functional," Minho reported. He looked thin after 3 years alone, but his eyes were bright with purpose. "I've been adding your special modifications to the water supply," Yoonji smiled. The modifications were Yunseo's biological agents, specially designed for Veltari physiology. Not deadly, but effective. The alien colonists had been getting sick for weeks without understanding why. "How many Veltari are on the planet now?" she asked. "About 8,000, Minho replied. "Most are requesting evacuation. They think the planet is cursed." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The aliens had stolen a paradise and turned it into a nightmare through their own ignorance and greed. Commander Thekfor stumbled into his command center, weak from the mysterious illness that had struck his forces. Half his soldiers were too sick to fight. The other half were demanding to know what was happening. "Sir," his aide gasped, barely able to stand. "We're receiving reports of attacks across the galaxy. 12 military bases have gone dark." Thekfor collapsed into his command chair. The timing couldn't be coincidence. His forces were helpless just as the consortium came under coordinated attack. "Who's attacking us?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir. The attacks came from nowhere. No ships on sensors, no warning. Just darkness." On his view screen, Thekvor could see human ships materializing in Terra Nova's orbit. Real ships, not the helpless refugee vessels he remembered. These were sleek, advanced, and clearly military. Captain Sujin Nam's voice came over the communication system. Commander Thekvor, this is Captain Nam of the Human Liberation Fleet. You are ordered to surrender Terra Nova immediately. Human Liberation Fleet? Thekvor laughed weakly. You're refugees, you have no fleet. Look around you, Sujin replied calmly. Your bases are dark, your fleets are disabled, your forces are sick. We've had 3 years to prepare for this moment. Did you really think we spent that time feeling sorry for ourselves? Through his office window, Thekvor could see human soldiers landing at the spaceport. They moved with military precision, securing key locations without firing a shot. His own forces were too weak to resist. This is impossible, he whispered. You taught us that impossible and human are the same word, Sujin said. Surrender now, and your people will be treated well. Fight us and we'll show you what happens when you push humans too far. In the consortium capital, emergency sessions were being called as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. 12. Military bases offline. Supply lines disrupted. Communication networks compromised. And somehow humans were behind all of it. How is this possible? Demanded High Counselor Zeltar, leader of the Nexari. The humans were scattered, broken. We made sure of it. Intelligence Chief Forth shuffled through his reports nervously. It appears we underestimated their capabilities. They've been operating in our space for years without detection. Operating how? Zeltar's crystalline body flashed with angry colors. They had refugee ships, not warships. The refugee ships were modified, Forth admitted. Our experts are analyzing the technology now. It's unlike anything we've seen. They can phase in and out of normal space. Admiral Hyunwoo Park materialized as a hologram in the consortium council chamber. Several alien leaders jumped in surprise. Their supposedly secure facility had been infiltrated by human technology. Honored counselors, Hyunwoo said with mock politeness, I bring greetings from the Human Liberation Fleet. This is an outrage, Zeltar shrieked. You were exiled. You have no right to return. We weren't exiled, Hyunwoo corrected. We were ethnically cleansed. There's a difference, though I don't expect you to understand it. He gestured, and the hologram changed to show images from Dr. Zhang's archaeological work. 12 species before us, all relocated, all murdered, all forgotten while you stole their achievements and rewrote history. The council chamber fell silent. Evidence of their crimes floated in the air before them, undeniable and damning. We offer you the same choice you gave us, Hyunwoo continued. Leave peacefully or face the consequences. The difference is we actually mean it when we say you can leave safely. Captain Boram Kwan led the assault on the Nexari crystal farms where they grew their living ships. Like all human operations, it was surgical and precise. Her teams disabled the growing chambers without harming the young crystal beings inside. Sir, one of her soldiers reported, we've found something interesting in the databanks. Records of human agricultural techniques. The Nexari have been trying to copy Dr. Kim's work. Boram smiled grimly. Let me guess. They can't make it work. Not even close. They've wasted 3 years trying to understand systems they stole. The pattern was the same everywhere humans struck. The consortium had stolen human innovations but lacked the knowledge to use them properly. They were like children playing, with tools they didn't understand. On 12 different worlds, oppressed species watched in amazement as human forces liberated consortium facilities. The humans didn't claim the worlds for themselves. Instead, they handed control back to the original inhabitants. Your world is yours again, Captain Wu Jinbei told the Kithri elders on their homeworld. The consortium garrison has been removed. Their weapons have been disabled. You're free. The elderly Kithri leader wept. We thought we would die as slaves. No one deserves to be a slave, Wu Jin replied. We learned that lesson the hard way. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Humans weren't conquering the consortium's territory. They were dismantling the entire system of oppression that had ruled for 1,000 years. Back on Terra Nova, Thekfor was led away in restraints that were more symbolic than necessary. He was too weak to resist. Dr. Yun Seo's biological agents had left him and his forces helpless. "You won't get away with this," he gasped to Captain Sujin. "The consortium has 1,000 worlds, 1,000,000 ships." "Had," Sujin corrected. Past tense. "Your communications are down. Your commanders don't know what's happening. Your fleets are running blind." She looked out at the city where human colonists were already returning to their homes. "You thought removing us from the galaxy would solve your problems. Instead, you taught us to work together like never before." Thekfor stared at her in confusion. "You're savages. Violent primitives." "No," Sujin said quietly. "We're teachers, and class is now in session." Across the galaxy, consortium forces found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't understand. Human ships appeared from nowhere, struck with impossible precision, and vanished before retaliation was possible. But the humans weren't trying to destroy the consortium. They were trying to educate it. Every strike came with a message. Every attack included historical records of consortium crimes. Every victory was followed by an offer of mercy for those willing to change. The galaxy was learning that humanity hadn't been exiled. It had been forged into something stronger than the consortium had ever imagined, and the lesson was just beginning. 6 months after the first human strikes, the Galactic Consortium no longer existed. In its place, representatives from 200 species gathered on neutral ground to discuss something that hadn't been seen in 1,000 years. Freedom. Senator Qsang Lim stood at the podium of the new Galactic Assembly. Around him sat beings from across the galaxy, many of whom had never been allowed to speak for themselves before. "The age of forced order is over," he announced. "Today begins the age of chosen cooperation." In the audience, former consortium leaders sat in special sections marked for war criminals. They would face justice, but human justice, trials, evidence, the right to defend themselves. It was more mercy than they had ever shown others. Admiral Hyunwoo Park watched from the gallery as species after species stood to speak their truth. The Kithri told of forced labor in crystal mines. The Vorthak described having their children taken as hostages. The Moralians spoke of watching their homeworld strip-mined for resources. Each story added to the record of consortium crimes. But more importantly, each story proved that the galaxy's people were ready to govern themselves. "Admiral," whispered his aide, "the Veltari delegation is requesting private talks." Yunwoo nodded. Even now, some aliens thought they could negotiate their way back to power. They didn't understand that power wasn't something to be negotiated anymore. Former Commander Thekfor sat in the detention facility on Terra Nova, staring out at gardens that bloomed more beautifully than ever. Dr. Yoonji Kim had returned to Gi, her work. But now she shared her knowledge freely with any species that wanted to learn. "I don't understand," Thekfor said to his human guard. "You could rule the galaxy now. Your technology is superior, your military is stronger. Why are you giving power away?" Guard Corporal Minho Kang smiled. "Because ruling isn't the point. Freedom is the point." Through the window, Thekfor could see human children playing with young aliens from a dozen species. They ran through the research gardens, carefully avoiding the growing crops, laughing in languages that mixed human words with alien concepts. "Your people adapt too quickly," Thekfor muttered. "It's unnatural." "It's survival," Minho replied. "You taught us that the universe is dangerous, so we learned to be dangerous back." In the orbital shipyards above Terra Nova, engineer Tae Hyun Yoon supervised the construction of a new type of vessel. Not warships, but exploration ships designed for joint crews from multiple species. Each ship was a symbol of cooperation rather than conquest. "The phase drive is working perfectly," he reported to Captain Ji-hoon Lee. "These ships can go places we've never seen before." Ji-hoon studied the design specifications. The ships were beautiful, elegant combinations of human innovation and alien craftsmanship. "How many species contributed to the design?" 17, Taehyun said proudly. "The Nixari provided crystal computing cores. The Veltari contributed gravitational controls. The Kithri added their stellar navigation systems. Even former consortium species wanted to help. It was a pattern repeated across the galaxy. Species that had been enemies for generations were working together, sharing knowledge and resources in ways the consortium had never allowed. Dr. Haiwan Zhang stood in the memorial hall built at the site of the first extinction. 12 empty chambers honored the species the consortium had destroyed. But the 13th chamber held something different: records of survivors. "We found them on the edge of the galaxy," she told the gathered crowd. 300 Althari survivors, 2,000 Moralians, even a few dozen Threnodi, still alive after 80 years of hiding. The crowd gasped. Species thought extinct for centuries were returning to the galaxy. They brought with them knowledge, culture, and perspectives that had been lost for generations. The consortium tried to erase them from history, Haiwan continued. They failed. Life finds a way. Truth finds a way. Justice finds a way. Captain Sujin Nam walked through the corridors of her new ship, the United Soul. It was larger than her old refugee vessel, but more importantly, it was home to a mixed crew. Humans worked alongside Kithri engineers, Veltari navigators, and Nixari computer specialists. Captain, called her first officer, a young Veltari named Kethra. "We're receiving the final reports from the reconstruction teams," Sujin smiled. 6 months ago, Kethra had been part of a consortium patrol. Now she was helping to build the new galaxy. "What's the status?" 147 worlds have established new governments, Kethra reported. 53 more are requesting help with transition planning. Only 12 are still refusing to participate in the assembly. And those 12? Isolated but not blockaded. As you ordered, they're free to choose their own path as long as they don't threaten others. It was the human way. Force no one, but protect everyone's right to choose. In the research laboratories scattered across human space, Dr. Yoon Seo Park worked with scientists from 24 species. Her biological weapons had been turned into medical treatments. Diseases that had plagued the galaxy for millennia were finally being cured. "The longevity treatments are ready for testing," she announced to her mixed species team. "If they work, we could extend healthy lifespan for most species by 50%. A Threnodi scientist, one of the ancient survivors, nodded approvingly. "Our people developed similar treatments before the consortium destroyed us. Your approach is more elegant." "Then let's combine our knowledge," Yoon Seo said. "Together, we can do better than either of us could alone." It was becoming the unofficial motto of the new galaxy. Together, we can do better. Admiral Dongjun Shin stood in the command center that had once coordinated humanity's secret war. Now it coordinated something more ambitious: the peaceful development of 200 worlds. "Sir," reported Intelligence Chief Yerin. "Oh, the last consortium holdouts are requesting negotiations." "Terms?" Dongjun asked. "Full amnesty for war crimes in exchange for cooperation with the new government." Dongjun shook his head. "No amnesty, but fair trials. If they're innocent, they go free. If they're guilty, they face justice. Justice, not revenge." It was a distinction many species struggled to understand. Humans had every reason to want vengeance, but they chose justice instead. It was perhaps their greatest victory over their former oppressors. On the rebuilt Terra Nova, children attended schools where human teachers worked alongside alien educators. They learned about agriculture from Dr. Yoonji Kim, about engineering from Tai Hyun Yoon, about history from Dr. Haewon Jang. Most importantly, they learned about the war, not as propaganda, but as truth. They studied how fear and hatred had led to oppression, how courage and cooperation had led to freedom, how the choice between these paths was one every generation would face. "Remember," Dr. Kim told her students, "the galaxy isn't free because humans are strong. It's free because all of us chose to work together." A young Veltari student raised her hand. "But teacher, what if bad people try to take control again, Dr.?" Kim smiled. "Then we'll be ready. Not with weapons, but with knowledge, not with fear, but with truth. The consortium fell because they ruled through ignorance. We succeed because we teach through wisdom. As the first anniversary of liberation approached, delegations from across the galaxy gathered to sign the Charter of Galactic Freedom. It wasn't a government or an empire. It was a promise that no species would face extinction for being different. That knowledge would be shared, not hoarded. That the strong would protect the weak, not exploit them. That freedom was a right, not a privilege. Admiral Hyunwoo Park signed for humanity, his signature joining those of 200 other species. As he lifted his pen, he thought about the refugees who had fled Terra Nova 3 years ago. They had lost their homes but found their purpose. The document is complete, announced Senator Kyu Sang. The Charter of Galactic Freedom is now in effect. Cheers erupted from species that had never celebrated together before. In the crowd, former enemies embraced. Former slaves stood as equals beside their former masters. Children played while their parents planned a future none of them could have imagined. But the real celebration was happening on worlds across the galaxy. On Terra Nova, where human crops fed a dozen species. In the crystal gardens of Nexar, where beings of living light learned to share their beauty. On the Kithri homeworld, where ancient songs were being sung again after centuries of silence. The galaxy had learned that diversity wasn't a threat to peace. Uniformity was the threat. Fear was the threat. Ignorance was the threat. As the celebration continued into the night, Captain Su-jin stood on her ship's bridge looking out at the stars. Somewhere in that vast darkness, exploration ships crewed by dozens of species were discovering new worlds, new wonders, new possibilities. The consortium had tried to create order through force. They had created stagnation. Humanity had created order through choice. They had created growth. The age of forced exile was over. The age of chosen exploration had begun. And in the gardens of Terra Nova, where human children played with alien friends under foreign stars, the future bloomed as beautifully as any crop Dr. Kim had ever grown. The galaxy was free. Not because humans had conquered it, but because all its people had chosen to make it so. That choice, more than any weapon or technology, was humanity's greatest gift to the stars.